That wasn't the Great Resignation. That was the Great Escape. People were escaping these toxic cultures, and we know they exist. The latest Gallup poll tells us that, around about 30% of people who go to work every day are actually engaged. So 70% of people who go to work every day are disengaged or actively disengaged. And if you don't have high will of the people and a good strategy, you're not going to maximize the outcome of your organization.
Garry, I thought a good starting point first would be maybe for you to share a pivotal moment in your life that really changed the course of your life.
Well, I guess there's been a couple of those moments, but I think the most impactful one was when I met Dr. Ken Blanchard, the guru of servant leadership, and that happened when I was actually 2 years into being the CEO of WD-40 Company. It was back in 1999. I'd been given the opportunity to take the blue and yellow can with a little red top to the world with a lot of help from my friends at the company. But what was really on my mind was, how do we build a culture that, given that the sun was never going to set on the can, that was empowered? And I didn't know how to do that. And I was curious about that. And I learned about a master's program at the University of San Diego, Master of Science in Executive Leadership. And I went to an information session, and Ken was speaking, and he said, most MBA programs get people in the head. What we've got to start doing is getting people in the heart. And it was that time I said, I'm going to enroll in this master's degree, and I'm going to learn from the guru of servant leadership what servant leadership's all about. And that was the start of the journey, really, of understanding that, life is not about you. It's about the contribution you can make to others. And so I think there was a couple of pivotal spots. I guess moving from Australia to the US was another one. Whitney Johnson, who's a friend of mine, she talks about, great opportunities come when you disrupt yourself. And I've had a few disruptions along the way. And when I reflect on those disruptions, even at the time when they felt somewhat uncomfortable and there was a lot of unknown, grasping that and going forward was very beneficial.
So, first of all, thank you for sharing both of those with us. And Whitney Johnson was an amazing guest on this podcast. We had a great conversation. Love her work. And I want to pull on a couple threads regarding your initial meeting and the learnings that you took away from Ken Blanchard. So, can you describe for us maybe what type of leader you were prior to this point, and then once Ken came into your life and you went through this master's program, how did that shift you as a leader?
Well, I was probably a lot like this person. And I don't know, you've probably read about this person in the book. This is Alec, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Inc. And Alec has some attributes that I probably had many of them in abundance, and they were basically that, my ego was probably too big. I probably wanted to have my nose in too many things. I was probably a micromanager. I probably didn't realize how negative a fear-based culture was. I probably thought I was a know-it-all. I probably thought I had all the answers, even the wrong ones. I probably didn't value learning as much as I then do now and think it's just an absolute fundamental. I was not someone who was very comfortable getting feedback, and I think those were important. And then when I think about what I learned from Ken and servant leadership, servant leaders love and involve their people. They're always in servant leadership mode. They're expected to be competent, so they're forever learners. They love what we now call the learning moment. They have a heart of gold, but you've got to have a backbone of steel as well. You're a champion of hope. Micromanagement is not scalable. You do what you say you're going to do, and you treasure the gift of feedback. So I went from in the disc profile being a turbo D, which was be brief, be bright, and be gone, to moving over to be an ID, which meant, I really did believe that building relationships in the business was really important.
That's remarkable. And can you give us a sense of from from the time that you acknowledged and recognized the type of leader who you were to that transition that took place, all the things that you were learning, that self-reflection, that becoming the servant leader? What was the timeline, if you will, or the time frame from A to B, if you will?
Well, I don't think there is an A to B. I think it's a continuing journey.
Mm,
And I often share that I have a little notebook that I carry around, and on the front of my notebook here, I have a reminder, and it says, "Am I being the person I want to be right now?" And then I say, "Who is that person?" And I have to continue to remind myself that I want to be grateful, caring, empathetic, reasonable. I want to be a listener. I want to be fact-based. I want to have a balanced opinion. I want to be curious. I want to be a learner. And I want to throw sunshine, not a shadow. So I think what that initial awareness was you have to be really aware of who you are and who you don't want to be, because if you're not, the world will drag you to places you don't want to go. So I think this thing is continuing, and I often say I've just completed my 25-year apprenticeship in leadership. Now I need to put it to work. But certainly in the master's program that I did, and it was quite interesting, Jay. The first class we had was a week-long class, and it was a class about understanding who you are. And there was a lot in that class. I went, ooh, I don't know if I want to hear this, or I don't know if I want to believe this. But it was also interesting because I was in a class of about 28 or 29 people. There was a whole varying industries and whatever, and they're saying, "What are you doing here? You're the CEO of a public company. Why are you here?" And I said, "I want to confirm what I think I know and learn what I don't know, because I think there's a better place to be." So it was that first week was really one that slapped me up the side of the head, and then I had to go, okay, and then it just continued from there. And Ken is just an amazing guy. It's his birthday in a week or so. He'll be 86, and we're
amazing.
dear friends. We stay connected, and I am. He's just a wonderful, wonderful person.
So let me ask you something about that note that you keep, and I love that. And I don't have the exact same note, but I have something similar as a reminder to me to really think about: am I showing up as the person who I know I'm capable of being? Am I caring? Am I doing those things? But I love the way that you approach that and what you said. Obviously, we have to hold ourselves accountable. And I'm sure you hold yourself accountable for living up to or doing your best to live up to what you've written down there. Who else surrounds you today that holds you accountable to be the best version of who you are?
Um, I think the first thing that holds me accountable, and people, is my purpose statement. My purpose statement is I help leaders build cultures of belonging where love, forgiveness, and learning inspire a happier, more connected world. And I ask people, to in, ensure that I continue to do that. You're holding me accountable today, because we're talking about, what's important to me. So, you know, uh, certainly my wife holds me accountable, but probably for things I don't deserve to be held accountable for, but that's okay. Um, but and I have a circle of, I've had a coach for all my life, and I'm still, work with him. I Because I coach 7 CEOs right now, they help me stay accountable. And I think, again, just asking myself, did I do my best too? I mean, that you hit it on the head. We don't. this is not finite. It's just a matter of awareness. In my coaching practice, my first part of my coaching practice is awareness. Are you aware of who you are? Now that we've kind of got to that, what do you want to change? So do you have an intention to change? And then the next thing is what actions you're going to take. And in my coaching practice, I ask my coaching clients to ask themselves daily questions. Did I do my best to be whatever they want to be, whatever those things are? So it's tough when you're out of the mainstream, but I think to live who I want to be, my purpose is important, and then the people that I work with, they get the right to slap me up the side of the head anytime they want.
I think asking those questions around who we are and that self-reflection and acknowledging the areas where, kind of like having blind spots, right? Having someone be able to look at us and reflect back those areas that we may not see ourselves, own them, accept them, and then look for the ways to improve upon those areas that can help us actually grow and move forward and become a better leader, become a better husband, a better human being in general. I think that can be, at least I found from personal experience, it's very difficult to do. Very difficult because we don't know what we don't know. And if we don't have that level of self-awareness or have others surrounding us that can hold that mirror up to us, which can be not a very comfortable situation. But without that, it can be very difficult trying to go it alone. Would you agree with that statement? Push back on me if you disagree and add additional context if there is some to add.
Jay, I often say we're just these basic human beings bumbling our way down this pathway of life. That's it. And in the bushes are these thieves that run out and grab us. And they pull us into the bushes. And they're the thieves of ego and greed and, all these things we don't want to be. And when we get in these bushes, for a moment, we might say, well, this is not so bad. But unless we continually have that true north, that center where we want to go, we've got to get back on that path again. And if we're not back on that path, we won't get to our destination. And the other thing that I think is important, we have no right to take our leftovers to people. And what I mean by that is, we could have a situation, we could be in a conversation, you could be in some sort of thing, and for some reason you get pulled into the bushes or you get discombobulated. The next person you see, if you don't recenter yourself, you take them your leftovers, and you have no right to take people your leftovers. So my learning and my coaching to people is take that time to center yourself. If you're rushing out of one meeting into the other, take a deep breath. Who do I want to be? I have no right to take my leftovers to this next person. They deserve my full plate. Fill my plate and move on again. And I think that was one of the big learnings I had was, okay, because we've all been in situations where we haven't enjoyed the last meeting, we haven't enjoyed the last situation. What right do we have to give that to someone else? That person or that situation we're going to go into deserves our best. So it's a matter of pause, recenter. I'm bringing my best to you. And a number of times, when I was full time in my role, I can remember sitting at my desk and doing this. Okay, let it go. Jay deserves me now. I'm going to go and be that person.
Amazing. That is so good. I appreciate you sharing that. And I feel the pain in that as you were talking about that. It immediately took me back to far too many memories of whether it was ego, well, sure, it was ego, right? And many other things that were driving just really poor behavior on my part. And of course, I can't change the past, but what I can change is the person who I am today. But I will just in full transparency, your book, had I had that book earlier in my corporate career, but not only had it, but read it, was ready for it, and put the lessons into practice, it would have saved me years of just inner turmoil, pain, and clearly I would have been a better leader sooner than later. And it's so interesting now to be able to self-reflect, and for any of us, right, to be able to look back and look in that rearview mirror and see the things that we did that, wow, I would have done that differently, knowing what I know now. And I think those are great lessons. And, you call them learning moments. Share with us how you define a learning moment, and tie this to how instrumental that was in your leadership role with WD-40 Company.
Well, the whole basis of the learning moment was that fear is one of the most disabling emotions we have. And in reality, every outcome is benefited by prior learning. Now, if we go back and just think about WD-40 itself, WD-40 was developed in 1953 by some chemists of a company called Rocket Chemical Company. And there was a problem with condensation and corrosion in the umbilical cord of the Atlas space rocket in San Diego. So these chemists got together and started to mix up some solutions. Well, Formula 1 didn't work, and 2 didn't work, and 15 didn't work, 27 didn't work, and 29 didn't work, and 35 didn't work, and 38 didn't work, and 39 didn't work. Guess what? 40 did. 39 learning moments got us to WD-40. Now, I'm really happy they didn't give up at 39, because I wouldn't have the opportunity to be with you today. And in fact, I'm really happy 39 didn't work, because I don't think WD-39 sounds anything as good as WD-40.
Agreed.
So, the history of the company proved that that was the case. And so I said, well, how do we create an environment where not only do we celebrate what works, but we gain from what didn't work? So the definition of a learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. So we put a description around it, and it was to encourage people to take the chance to experiment, but also to ensure that we did share what we learned. Now, I happened on this concept when I was going through my master's degree, and I used to get comments, you go to school on Sunday and you come to work on Monday and you implement things, Gary. I said, well, I want to see if it works. So it was interesting, because I said, right, we're not going to talk about failure anymore. We're going to talk about learning moments. And here's what the definition is. And, I want you all to share what's working and what's not working, and everybody's going to be safe. And I heard the echoes. Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, right. So I really learned that, what we have to do is take fear out of fear. So when we first rolled out the learning moment, I put a program together for a year, and I said, okay, I want everybody to think about their learning moments. I want you to email me them, on a monthly basis. I'm going to share those out, and we'll have a monthly prize. At the end of the year, we're going to have a grand prize, and we're going to send to you and your significant other around the world, visiting first class, visiting our offices, and everybody. Okay. The first month, I got 4 people that actually submitted the learning moment. And I went, okay. So what did I do with those 4 people? I made heroes out of them. I put them on stage. I talked about them immensely. Thank you, Jay, for sharing your learning moment. This was what we learned from that. Oh, so month 2, I got 12. What did I do? I made heroes out of them. So I'm now building the trust. So by the time we got to month 11, we were getting hundreds of these. But I think the learning moment of the learning moment introduction is, you can implement anything, but if the people don't trust that what you say is what you're going to do, you're never going to get any response from it.
Ooh, what an amazing journey. So I want to talk about learning moments, but I'd like to tie a learning moment back, way back in time. Let's turn the clock back a bit to you growing up with your mother and father. And really, what I'd like to focus on, if we can, could you share with us one particular learning moment, key lesson that you took away? Let's start with your mom, a key lesson from mom that you carry with you today that still resonates. So let's start with mom, and then let's do the same thing with dad, if you will.
Yeah. Well, you're probably pointing to a chapter in the book that's called, the title is Even the Queen Sits Down to Pee. And the big learning from my mum was, to summarize it down, and mum lived till she was 99 years and 9 months old, was, Gary, don't get too big for your boots. Everybody in the world deserves to be recognized. And when I moved to the US, I'd fly back and see mum, and I tell the story about having a cup of tea with mum, and I still have the teacup here in my office. And she was someone who would give you unconditional love about feedback, and not hold back on it at all. But she did it for the right reasons. So with mum, it was, don't get too big for your boots. We have something in Australia called the tall poppy syndrome. If people get too tall in their boots, we cut them down in a caring and sharing and loving way, I must say. And so that was important with mum. And then um, be brave enough to, in a loving and caring way, give feedback. And I called that a cup of tea with mum. So I think everybody needs mums and sons in their thinking. With
So,
dad,
so I want to pause there
yeah.
for just 1 second. Give us an example, if you will. Think back. Give us an example of that unconditional love feedback. So, a piece of feedback that you would have received, and how mom gave that feedback to you.
Oh, um, Gary, your nephew won his soccer championship last week. Why didn't you call him? Simple as that. Auntie Mari's been in hospital. Did you send her a card? Just simple stuff like that was so important. I mean, it was it was just the simplicity of, are you paying attention to what matters, and are you doing what you need to do to make sure you're recognizing people, and you're not corporate royalty. You're just that bloke from Five Doc.
Okay, so let's go to your dad. Same question.
Yeah, Dad was born in 1907. He worked for the same company for 50 years. And what I learned from Dad was, a fair day's work for a fair day's pay. Dad always said a man's word is a man's bond. And Dad was just a disciplined person around keeping commitments. If he did, if he, and he was really a very fact-based person. You could be having a conversation with Dad, and I remember him saying, let's just be factual about this. Have we gathered the facts? And that's probably why I'm kind of a negative towards conspiracy theories. I don't get any energy out of having a conversation around, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I get no energy from it at all. Um, because in most circumstances, and I love what Brene Brown says, in the absence of facts and data, we make up stories, and those stories become our truth. And I always, there's a great book called Who Moved My Cheese? And there was a follow on from that, which is a book called Out of the Maze. And the whole essence of Out of the Maze was, why do I believe what I believe? And I read that book a number of years ago, and it really, really forced me to ask myself questions often. Why do I believe that? What right do I have to believe that? And then, what's going to really give me the credibility to be able to say, yes, I believe that. So the other thing that I like to, I suggest with people is, ask yourself, well, why do I believe that?
That's an very important question to ask as I find myself today navigating very challenging uh, political waters and divisiveness and so forth. And I really do try to step back and reflect on the things that I believe, why I believe those, why I feel myself getting tense or getting agitated over certain things that I may read, hear, see, and really trying to understand, is that a belief that was given to me? Is it something that I am willing to explore and potentially let go of, because I'm exploring it through curiosity and wanting to learn and wanting to grow? So it's interesting. And when it comes to beliefs, I don't want to make any assumptions here on your part, but I have certainly found that whatever my beliefs are, that I will go and I will find evidence to support that belief one way or the other. And again, it ties to those stories that we tell ourselves that, quite frankly, can keep us stuck, that can keep us from becoming a better version of who we are, and can affect our relationships and everything else that we do in life.
Well, any action is driven by a belief, a feeling, or intention. And beliefs, feelings, and intentions are fed by fact, fiction, and opinion. So if you've got a belief that's driven by fiction and opinion, it's going to drive an action that's probably not the best action you can take. So you ask yourself, is this fact, fiction, or opinion that's driving my beliefs, feelings, and intentions? And from that, how do I feel about the action?
Powerful questions to ask, which is one of the things that I love about the conversation that we're having right now, because you have brought up more than one time questions, very deep questions, not surface level, but deep questions that you ask yourself and that you encourage others to be able to explore and to ask as well. So, with that said, what are one or two bigger questions that you're asking yourself today that you're really contemplating on? And I mean the big questions about life, about business, about relationships, about marriage, whatever it happens to be, just one or two big ones.
Yeah, I think the question I'm asking myself is this loneliness pandemic going to really negatively, intensely impact us going forward? We've got a loneliness pandemic right now. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the cause of it was COVID. We sent people home into their, you know, little places, and people got used to being on their own. And now we're afraid to bring people back together again. Um, certainly it's not about productivity in the workplace. Sure, you can be as productive as if you're working on some project, you can do it at the desk at the office or do it at your desk at home. But true inspiration comes from meaningful conversation between people. So one of the things that's worrying me is this loneliness epidemic that's out there, is that, how do we bring people back together in the workplace? And I think another question that I would ask leaders to ask themselves is, Jay's running out the door today. He high fives his wife, husband, or significant other and says, I am so excited to go to fill in the blank today because we are going to fill in the blank. What are the fill in the blanks that you're creating in your organization that when someone wakes up on Monday morning, they're excited to go to work or to a workplace? Now, unfortunately, that was tainted by toxic workplaces as well, because a lot of people who wake up on Monday morning, not only are they going somewhere to do what they think is exciting things, they're going to a workplace that's toxic. When we had COVID, they talked about the great resignation. That wasn't the great resignation. That was the great escape. People were escaping these toxic cultures, and we know they exist. The latest Gallup poll tells us that, around about 30% of people who go to work every day are actually engaged. So 70% of
Wow.
people who go to work every day are disengaged or actively disengaged. And if you don't have high will of the people and a good strategy, you're not going to maximize the outcome of your organization. So the big thing that's on my mind is what do we do? Isn't it about time we really woke up to the fact that as leaders of people in organizations, we have to do a few things. One, we have to create an environment where people know and feel like they belong. We have to create an environment where people know and feel like they matter. We have to create an environment where people know that they can make choices and be supported. And we have to create an environment where every day someone has the opportunity to learn something new around people that they really, really do admire. So imagine a workplace where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to something bigger than yourself, you learn something new, you're protected and you're set free by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. Happy people create happy families. Happy families create happy communities. Happy communities can create a happy world. And I don't think anybody would argue with me right now that a little happier world would be okay. And business has the opportunity, and I believe the responsibility, to actually make a positive difference in the world by creating cultures where people actually want to go there on Monday morning, not calling up and not wanting to go there.
All right, my friends, for those that are watching and listening right now, I am going to encourage you to rewind and listen to what was just shared with you by Garry. And please understand that it is possible. It is absolutely possible. And so, Garry, here's what I'd like to do for just a couple of moments. So you talk about this in your latest book, Any Dumbass Can Do It. You give great examples, learning moments, lessons, etc. And these are the stories are fantastic, and they're personal stories as well. This is a very it comes across to me as a very personal book. But here's what I want to do. First, I want to share with all of our listeners and those that are watching right now that yes, the book is filled with real stories. Yes, it's practical lessons. Yes, it's advice on leading with more care, candor, and accountability. You have to do something with the information that you are consuming. No change equals no change. So obviously, we're going to provide a link in the show notes where you can pick up a copy of this book. And please make sure that you are reading it, you're taking it to heart, and that you are applying those practical lessons that you're learning. Okay, so we're going to do that. But I want to provide a couple quick quotes here. So, of your book, Garry, Simon Sinek said, Garry Ridge is the embodiment of what it means to be a great CEO. And Adam Grant said, Garry Ridge's take on leadership is as refreshing as it is rare. I want to stay on that point from Adam Grant for just a moment or two. Why is your take on leadership, the things that we've been talking about, the way that you've articulated leadership and culture, why is it so rare?
That's the question that I ask all the time, because in reality, it is being leading from a servant leadership heart, where you involve your people, is the key to a successful business and a happy cultural environment. But maybe it's because people are thinking that, building a great culture is like sprinkling fairy dust on an organization, and it absolutely is not. This is simple, but it's not easy. And time is not your friend. I have a friend of mine, his name is Charlie Malouf. He owns a chain of Ashley furniture stores out in the Charlotte area. He has a beautiful thing that he shared with me. He said, culture is not a microwavable event. You have to take a crock pot approach. And I think that a lot of leaders want to, bring in that one training program, sprinkle some fairy dust, blah. The other thing is fish rot from the head. And if the head of the organization is not prepared to live the servant leadership role, you're not going to have servant leaders in the organization. One of the keys that we did also, which was so powerful, is we took the word manager out of our vocabulary. Every leader was called a coach. And here's why, Jay. Jay, it's your first day at work, right? You walk in and I walk up to you and say, welcome, Jay, to the organization. I'm your manager. Well, how does it feel? But what if you walk in the first day, g'day, Jay, I'm your coach. And my job is to help you play your best game you possibly can play. So I tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to help you look at what it takes to win in the organization. I'm never going to run on the field and micromanage you and take the ball away from you, but I'm going to spend a lot of time on the sideline there. You'll know I'm there. I'll never go to the podium and pick up the prize and take your glory away from you. I'll be spending a lot of time in the stinky locker room with you and the other team members because that's where we build trust. And that's where I really hear what the game's all about. So I'm only here for one reason, to help you win. The other book that I wrote with Ken Blanchard, the book is, it's called Helping People Win at Work. And the byline is, I'm not here to mark your paper. I'm here to help you get an A. So all of that comes down to the fact is to make this work in an organization, the leader has to be committed to the fact that the only reason they're there is to help those they have the privilege to lead play their best game. And a lot of them don't think that way. It's all about short-term results, particularly if you're a public company. We were a public company, right? And come on, you can't run a company in 90-day intervals. It's not about the penny of the quarterly earnings. We're there to build an enduring company that we're proud to hand on to others. And it's not going to be a straight line. It's going to be up and down and around. And the first thing that happens when things, don't go well, they lay off people. Well, why would you want to do that? Well, did you make the wrong decision at the beginning? Or were you overemployed at the beginning? But why do you want brain drain out of your organization? So, one of the things that I'm most proud of is in my 25 years at WD-40 Company as CEO, we never laid anybody off in any time. And we went through, the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, COVID, the Asian meltdown, the European, all of this stuff. Now, that didn't mean that people didn't leave the company. Of course, if they weren't there to help to get an A, well, we'd share them with competitors. But really, it was about the commitment that we had to building, and that's why 98% of the people at the company said they loved to tell people they worked at the company, and why we had a 93% employee engagement.
Truly remarkable. And again, it speaks to the fact that it can be done when you're intentional about it, and that there is buy-in at every level of the organization, and that everyone is living those principles, those values, and living the culture that's been established. You obviously talk a lot about culture. You talk about creating a tribal culture, tribal being the operative word here. And just if you could, just to give us an explanation for all those that are watching and listening right now, why tribal culture? There's some history behind that.
Yeah, well, the whole human race is tribal. When I talk about tribal, I'm not talking about any indigenous group or anything that any indigenous group wants to grab hold of. And I got some negative feedback sometimes that, you can't say that. I said, what do you mean? I can't say that. I mean, Ugg the caveman, way back in the beginning, was a member of a tribe. And if you think about what is the purpose of a tribe? It's a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. That's what a tribe's all about. And what is the number one responsibility of a tribal leader? To be a learner and a teacher. Because if the tribal leader was not learning and teaching and helping the tribe improve, the tribe would go extinct, whether there was Ugg the caveman tribe or an indigenous, whoever it was. So again, it goes back to, and think about Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualization. The first two rungs are basics around, can I survive and do I have what I need? The third one is love and belonging. So what do you want to belong to? I want to belong to a tribe or a clan or whatever it is that you want to talk, but then describe it. Learning and teaching, values, purpose, specialized skills, celebration, all of those things that are important around a place where people know and feel like they belong.
Incredible. So, Garry, when you step down from your role with WD-40 and you're pursuing what you're doing today, do you feel as fulfilled as you as fulfilled now as you did in the role that you had for so many years?
I just feel different. I mean, yes, the answer is yes, in that I am dedicated to my purpose, which I shared with you, which is I
Mm-hmm.
help leaders build cultures of belonging where love, forgiveness, and learning inspire a happy, more connected world. And, I've seen, people who are being hurt by toxic cultures, and it doesn't need to be that way. So, this is my legacy is that I can call BS. We did it. I didn't do it. We did it. I titled the book intentionally. Any dumbass can do it because anybody can do it. If you are brave enough to put the ingredients in place and to act on it on an ongoing basis. When I was in high school in Australia many years ago, many, many years ago, my science teacher gave me a petri dish. And the science teacher said, we're going to grow culture in this petri dish. And the science teacher said, there are two things that are really important. What ingredients do you want to put in? And then how are you, as the owner of the petri dish, going to ensure that you feed the ingredients that is dedicated to growing the culture you want, and you're brave enough to attack the toxins? And I think in a lot of cases, what happens is we're not brave enough to attack the toxins that get into our petri dish. Ron Carusi, another dear friend of mine, wrote a great book called To Be Honest. And he says a lot of people protect their own comfort zone at the expense of other people's development. And that speaks a little bit to what I learned from my mum, right? That tough love, with unconditional love, with care. And how many times have we protected our own comfort zone because we didn't want to have that conversation because it was going to negatively impact us when we should? And that was a big learning moment for me. I was in situations where I thought, oh, this is going to be a tough conversation. And I said to myself, Garry, you talk about how much you love your people, but you're not brave enough to have the conversation to help them be a better person because you know it's not going to be comfortable for you. That's not love, that's greed.
And you're doing a disservice to the other person.
Exactly. Now, the
Absolutely.
challenge is these conversations become really uncomfortable if you haven't done the pre work, which the pre work is, have you and that person spent time to clearly answer the questions, what do I expect from you and what do you expect from me and what does an A look like? Because most of those conversations are really uncomfortable when there's a lot of ambiguity around, well, I don't know what you meant or who you are or why you wanted that. So that goes back to the fact as in organizations, let's make sure we've clearly defined what an A looks like. Because I'm not here to mark your paper. I'm here to help you get an A.
Beautifully said. So, Garry, if you had the opportunity to have a conversation with any one person who's either still living or no longer with us, and you could ask that person one question and one question only. First, who is the person that you would want to have the conversation with? And then, second, what is the one question that you would ask?
Nelson Mandela. One of my favorite movies is Invictus. And And I would ask Nelson Mandela, what was it that gave you the strength for forgiveness?
Ooh, that's a big one. And an exceptional movie. Thank you for sharing that. So, Garry, I have an ask, and then I have one final question for you. The ask is, would you please give all of us, including me, one challenge? What is something that you would challenge us to do starting immediately?
Oh, life's a gift. Don't send it back unwrapped. So do some serious unwrapping and do it in a way that is there to help others step into the best version of themselves.
Oh, gosh, that is so good. My final question to you. What is one of the most difficult decisions that you've had to make in the pursuit of who you are today? One of the most difficult decisions.
That's a that's an interesting question. You know, I'm going to say that I'm not really good at answering that question, and here's why. Is I leave stuff at the station really easily. I don't remember bad things that well or difficulties that well. But I would say to answer the question, I would think some of the challenging decisions were, those life-changing decisions that you make when you disrupt yourself. So I think that's really, the answer, my answer to that question. A lot of people ask me similar questions like that. I go, I don't really remember. I mean, I I know what's important and I do it. Well, I think I know what's important. I do it. And I learn along the way and I fall over and I fall on my face and I stumble and that's why I am the Dean of Dumbassery. I mean, that's it.
So good. Garry, I want to thank you so very much for joining us today on Business Minds Coffee Chat. What a phenomenal conversation. So wise, so practical. Thank you for sharing your insights, your stories, and educating us. I feel like this has been a master class in leadership, and I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much.
Jay, it's been my pleasure. And may I say I'm grateful for you and for the time you spend to get the word out because we can make a difference in the world and the world's too special, so we should do that. Oh, and by the way, if people want to test their dumbassery, of course, they can go to my website and take the dumbass quiz. And if they take the dumbass quiz, I'll send them a PDF of an immediate playbook that they can start to do some things in their organization that they might find of value. So www.thelearningmoment.net, take the dumbass quiz.
Brilliant. Obviously, we will link to that in the show notes. And my friends, thank you so very much for watching and for listening. I do have a quick favor before we wrap up. Would you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts? Let us know what you thought about this particular episode. That helps us expand our reach and attract amazing guests just like Garry. And to listen to more podcasts, all you need to do is visit jscherbusinessconsulting.com, click that podcast button. And until next time, my friends, keep learning, keep growing, run to pick up a copy of Any Dumbass Can Do It. And we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care, everybody.